Hello and welcome back to ConsoleTraining.com's Basic Series in 3.2, Lesson 4. In our previous 3 lessons, we learnt how to patch fixtures, auto-generate palettes, and in our last episode we created our first sequence and we went over why it's good to palette. In this episode, what we're going to do is we're going to create some secondary queues to our queue lists that we've got here. And we're going to talk about tracking, and we're going to do a bit of move in black action here as well. So we are exactly where we were before, and we're going to jump straight in. We're going to concentrate on room 1 for the moment, and we're going to stick with one queue list. So we're going to create a little show. We're going to imagine, once again, we're still in corporate mode. So what our next queue is going to be is we're going to lose the 250s. And we're going to bring in our lectern lights, or our stage wash, so to speak. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to bring up our stage wash, like so. It's very white. We're going to back our intensity off a bit on our stage wash, firstly. So it's a bit less bright. Then we're going to store that. And we're going to get a bunch of other options as well. We've got overwrites, merge, status merge, remove, release, and create second queue. We're going to go through all of these in detail later. But what we want to do is we want to create a second queue. By doing that, what we've now got is, if we clear our programmer, we've got Q1 and Q2. And the next thing we're going to do is we want to lose these 250s from Q2. So while we're in Q2, what we can do is we can grab our 250s. And we can go through all the parameters. And what we want to do is we want to release. Now we can go through all our parameters to do that. Or what we can do is we can click our delete button a couple of times. We can see here our feedback changes from delete to remove to release, and we can click on our fixture and it's going to select all the parameters for our fixtures automatically, and then we're going to click update. But we're going to make very sure before we do that we click and we make sure that we're adding new content, and we're making sure that we're adding to Q2. And when we do that, and we click Update Queue, and we clear it out, we now have Q1 and Q2. And what that release is doing is it's telling it, in Q2, we don't want to use these fixtures anymore, and you can release them essentially back to the programmer. So they'll sit at their 50-50 position and not do much until we use them again. What we could have done is we could have done the cheap version, which is, let's quickly, we'll create Q 1.2 for a sec. So if I bring our 250s into the programmer for a sec, and then we click store Q 1.1, and we do that, we've got Q 1.1. And what most people like to do is they like to go, oh well, if I just update the information, I say I want it to be closed, and we go update Q1.1, they've essentially achieved the same thing. They've turned them off, but the fixtures are still sitting in a position with the gobo in them and everything, and there's no real reason to do that. It's much nicer to have them release. So what we're going to do is we're going to now delete a queue, so we can click delete, click on 1.1, and click OK. And we're going to once again check our workings, make sure everything's working. And everything is working, but we're going to look at the queue list for a second here. And the reason we're going to do that, and how we do that, is we click on the queue list part here. And we can do a couple of things here. Firstly, we can name them. So we're going to name our queues, and you can click assign and click, or with a mouse you can right click on a text field, and we're going to call it opening, or we're going to call it room look, and we're going to call it stage wash up. And when we go stage wash up, we can also fade things. So let's set a nice 2-second fade. And then when we run this, we'll turn it off. Everything fades up. And then when we go to 2, it fades out nicely. But when it fades out nicely, watch what our 250s do. Because they're going back to their position, they drop their gobo immediately. And it looks quite ugly, and it also drops colour. What we can do is we can go across, and there's lots of different options. And what we can do is we can delay our gobo for 3 seconds, for example, and we can also delay our colour for 3 seconds. And then when we do this again, what it's going to do is it's going to fade nicely out, and after 3 seconds it's going to do exactly what it was doing before, except now it's doing it in black essentially. So it's still removing the colour and it's still removing the gobo. Now the next cue we want happens to be a table pickup or something. Well, let's create something else. So let's say our next cue is, hypothetically, we've got, a video state or something, which is quite common. We can store, create a third cue, go into our third cue, and then we can drop our dimmer, we can release it, we click update, and we change it to add new content, and we change it to Q3. And we're going to do exactly the same thing as we did before. We're going to go to our cue list, we're going to add a 2-second fade to it, and we're going to call it video state. And we're going to check our workings out again, so we're going to go from show start, lectern on, and then video state. And the next thing we want is we really want our lectern light back on. We've finished with our video, we want to bring our lectern back on. So if what we do is we do, in our command line, copy Q2 at 4, and we click on our sequence, it's not going to do it because I've forgotten to name it. So there are two ways. If we just go copy Q at this, it doesn't know which executor to reference unless we make it the default sequence, which we can see with the little green thing here. So if I was to go select like that, now all our commands like this, so if we go copy Q2 at copy Q2 at 4, please, and we click OK, we've got Q4. I like to do things with no matter, even if I'm working in the main cue list like we are here, I like to do things with a bit of definition. I like to know exactly what I'm doing. So I normally go copy executor 5 Q2 at 4, which does exactly the same thing. Except I forgot to define the executor part. Don't you love when things don't work properly? Copy executor 5 Q2 at executor 5 Q4. And then we've created exactly the same thing. We could also do the same thing with the sequence number. So we know that this is sequence number 1 because its little number is up the top. There are very, very many different ways to do things. If you need to be quick, I would just keep selecting the sequence you're working on, because normally you'll only be working on one sequence, and you can just go copy X to Y and problem solved. Now, it's also inherited our failed time, so if we go through our show again, got a nice little fade, and then our lectern lights come back on. And then in Q5, what we want is we want our 250s. We want them out into the audience. So we imagine that our speaker is saying something, you know, I'd like to thank someone in the audience, and we want an audience position. So we'll do that. Let's bring our camera back a bit. And we'll use our align tool again just to get them sort of on a nice crossover. And we don't want to blind people, so we also want to put them in a color, so we'll put them in, you know, a pink. Then we go store and just click any part of it, and now we've got Q5. But if we go through our cues again, we go to our video state, we return to our stage wash. When we do this, they're going to snap out like that. We can solve this in two ways. We could put this position and color information into Q4. Or what we can do is we can create a move in black. So there's a area in our cue list. If we right click, we can say we want it to be early, which means it's going to do it early. So if we go through our cue list, it's already there. We're also going to give it a fade time so we can see what it's doing. We can make it early, we can make it late, or we can even choose the cue we want it to happen on. So if we in fact want it to happen, instead of being on Q4, which is where it normally happens, we can have it happen on Q3. So when we fade to video state, those lights have already moved. And we can demonstrate this by turning up essentially the house lights. We'll go ambient color, and we'll go through our cues again. Q1, Q2, and we can see that our 250s are now in their home position. 3, we can see they're already getting in position ready to go. Q4, nothing happens. And then Q5, up comes our pink light. And that's it. So now we've covered move in black. We've even named some cue lists. So we're going to call this audience wash. We've copied some cues. I've shown you both ways. The thing with MA is it's an infinitely powerful console. I reckon it's the best desk on the market, but there are 10 different ways of doing things. Learn one way really, really well, and then come back and learn the other ways. And I know I've said that, and then I've still given you options, but there's going to be people who have half learned a certain method, and we just want to build on that knowledge. We want to reinforce what they already know. So sometimes we have to deviate. Sometimes I will show you the wrong way, the right way, and then another way of doing things. Sometimes I'll show you 5 different ways. I will try to explain that they are different ways, but hopefully this has been helpful. Anyway, this was the short one. Thank you for watching. In our next episode, we're going to look at effects, starting, stopping, and stomping.